Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Understories with me, your host, Lindsay Fowler. This week is the last week before we all disappear for the holidays, so just for fun, we turned the tables and my brilliant colleague, Kat, interviewed me. We dive into the last 9 months of working together, the challenges of 2023, how I work, what my plans are, and oh, dear Lord, what the future might hold. It was really fun being interviewed by Kat, and it was just really a bit of fun before we all dash off. Before we get started, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating or a review wherever you're watching or listening to this. Tell a friend. And don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified about future episodes which come out every Tuesday. But for now, here's my conversation with Kat. So welcome, Katerina.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is a new exercise to have the tables turned on me, but I think of anyone to do it, it's probably you. So, so for the listeners out there, I asked Kat to join me on the pod because it's the last week before Christmas, and basically everyone's tuned out, and so I thought it'd be quite fun to do just sort of a funny recap chat between the two of us over the last 9 months we've worked together and talk a bit about what we're doing and all that stuff. So Kat has prepared questions for me, so I'm a little nervous, but we'll go with it.
Oh yeah, I didn't show her to Linds before, so it's gonna be a bit of a surprise. But it's nothing, special.
I mean, if they are, even more the better. Put me on the spot. It'll be great.
So, I mean, probably to kick this off, we've been working together for 9 months, right? It feels like a long time, and at the same time, very short time for me. Lots has happened. I mean, how do you feel about this past year? Because to me, you've mentioned several times that it's been quite challenging for various reasons.
Yeah.
So how would you reflect on that?
Well, you mean in terms of the types of challenges that I've had?
Yeah. I mean, it was quite a big, I think, year in terms of the business, right? Like you decided to hire additional person. You've conquered some of your fears.
Yeah. I think this has been probably the most challenging year so far. And it was funny because I was talking to my coach, Tom, last week, and he had told me that actually knows that he said that the third year tends to be the hardest in a lot of ways because you are kind of coming out of those initial phases where you're kind of doing everything. And then you start to sort of hone down a little bit more about what you're interested in, what you want to do. And I really feel like that for this year has been quite a challenge. And also the fact that I always say this, that I basically was like coasting for the first half of the year because I was like, I got all this work signed up. And it's really easy to do that. And I think that even for people who quote unquote should know better, it's really easy to get kind of like comfortable because it's easier to just sit and do the work and not have to do the outreach and not grow the business but it's also really short-sighted thinking because, projects end, collaborations finish, they should do, like, that's not how this works. So if I hadn't done that, I think I probably would have had maybe a slightly less challenging year in that. But I mean, bringing you on has not been the challenge, if I'm honest. I think if anything, having you has been such a bolster to the company because I think I've said this to you before, but having someone who allows me to be able to think and not get so bogged down in doing all the day-to-day stuff is really useful. Not that I don't dislike not that I dislike the day-to-day, but it when you're running a business, it's a different thing than just doing a thing. So you have to kind of make time to section off for that. But also I think, the way that your mind works and like the systems that you the way that you think is just so useful for me, because I'm just like, la, la, la. I'm like thinking about this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, no, you don't have to do that this week. You can do that next week. You can do this thing. You can do that, And so, yeah, that's been amazing. So I don't think we would have gone as far as we could. I don't think we would have gone as far as we did this year without you, which I think you should take credit for, which is really exciting. And I'm pretty sure that I would have been in a very different place this time last year. Sorry, this year if I hadn't brought you on. But yeah, you've not been the challenge of anything. That's been the best bit. I'm like, brilliant. So yeah. But yeah, I've definitely conquered fears, definitely had to work through some demons. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And do you feel like now you're more grounded and you feel more confident at what you do, and that you kind of now are prepared for the next year and grow the business?
Yeah, I would say that I feel more focused. I think the work we did at the end of this year, when we were talking about what we were planning for next year, and actually having a strategy, was great, because now I know what we have to do, as opposed to before, which was just sort of, it felt very reactive in a lot of ways, which we're always talking about this with our clients about being proactive, but it's really easy to be susceptible to that because you get so like in the mix. So I think I feel more focused for next year. And also I think we talked about this as well, like not going into next year with like a hustle mentality. We were like, no hustling, no hustling, really trying to be methodical and thoughtful. And by sticking to the strategy, it gives us those safeguards to know that we're doing everything that we possibly can. And then when those things are done, we do the other things. It's just less of a machine gun approach than before. Yeah.
I think that's something that, like, for me was very surprising, that it's easy for us to kind of fall into the patterns that we tell our clients not to go to. And then we need to kind of reflect on that and be like, hey, Linds, or hey, Kat, like, let's refocus and make sure we're thinking strategically and we're not just carried away with the day-to-day work, right?
Yeah. And it's really hard. I mean, I think it's given me, I've always said to clients, I think even before you started, I would always say that this experience of running my own company has made me much more empathetic towards them. Before I used to be kind of incredulous that how people could just, do these, but now I'm like, oh no, it's really easy to do it because you take your eye off the, the focus. And I think that's the thing, is trying to maintain the macro and the micro at the same time, like go up and go down, go up and go down, into the granular, and then go to the big picture. But it is hard. It is. It's hard. Has that been a challenge for you?
Role. Well, sometimes feel a bit schizophrenic about it, right? Because you kind of need to constantly be on both sides and make sure you are focusing on the day-to-day, but at the same time also seeing it in the wider context.
Yeah, it's true. But I don't think you can build a successful company without doing both, unfortunately. So I think in terms of the schizophrenia of it, I think maybe you just tried to make it a little bit more planned, like planned schizophrenia, but so that the vacillation between the two doesn't happen as often. It's like, but that, say, like on Fridays when I take the Friday, I sort of a couple hours in the afternoon there to just really like sit and focus. And I think that is really helpful. But it does feel quite decadent, if I'm honest. So,
well, that's really interesting. Can you talk about that a bit more? Like, what kind of led you to actually dedicate 2 or 3 hours at the end of every week to actually not do anything and rather reflect, think, write? Because that's, I think, hard for a lot of people to kind of be okay with not producing anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge to get me to do it. It's interesting. This summer, I met another consultant who he's been in the game for much longer than I have. I know him through through Kieran and my husband, and through the work that he does with TM. And so this man he's the kind of consultant that is really talking at the high level. Like, we're talking like the Jedi stuff all the time. And it's so enriching to talk to him, especially when this is something that, that I can just geek out about all the time. But when we met in the summer, I was talking about how I felt that I was being ineffective, that I wasn't being very proactive in the business, that I was kind of still reacting to stuff. I was unsure about what I was trying to do. And he suggested that I do this, but then he held me accountable to do it. So I met him in August. And so he said, by the end of September, I want you to send me an email, and I want you to, you're like, what day are you going to do it? And I said, I guess Friday afternoons are good. He's like, okay, you're going to do Friday afternoons. And he like wrote it down in his little notebook. And then he was like, when are you going to write to me and tell me how it's been for you? He's like, because I'm guaranteeing you that you will come out of it a completely different person. And I was like, yeah, maybe. It just felt so like decadent, to do this. And so like, such a luxury. And so, but I did it I started doing it over September, and there was difference. I think I started thinking much more clearly about things. Interestingly, I think that it started to get distracting when I brought my phone with me. And so I've started like not having my phone with me. So I've having to leave my phone, which is, so it's a full like two and a bit hours cut off from technology, notebook, maybe a book. That's it. And I think what it does is it gives me a chance to kind of get some perspective on the week. Like usually the idea is I come in on Mondays with you and I say, these are the things we achieved last week. This is what we did, and we should celebrate those things, but also kind of think about what didn't work. What could we do better? Yeah. And then, think about some of my own ideas about how I think about, I don't know, client work, or, what we're going to do with the business, or what we want to do next, So it is very decadent, but it is, I think, actually, I'm not going to say decadent. I think it's necessary, but it feels like in the world that we live in, it feels decadent because we are always caught up in all the doing and stuff.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, no, I'm going to take 2 hours, go sit at the Hortus Botanicus, have a coffee, just think. And it's really difficult. It's not easy in the beginning, for the record. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. I would be like, what should I do? How do I do this? Yeah.
I'm like, okay, twiddling my thumbs a little bit, being like, okay, I'm here with my notebook. Come on, inspiration strike. But it doesn't sometimes. So you have to kind of just start. And I think then the inspiration starts to come along with it. So, yeah.
So since you've been kind of focusing also on this reflection, what would you say that is the part of the process that you enjoy the most when working with creative businesses?
So you're asking,
what is it that you
after doing this reflection that I do,
if you like maybe came to some conclusion, like this is what I enjoy the most, or this is what I think is really great about the process when working with clients?
Truth be told, I know I just said that I do think about like some client work, but I think most of the time when I do this stuff, I don't actually think about the clients that we have. Well, I do in the sense of like our role in it, but I don't think I think about the successes we're having with them or the things that I don't think are going so well. It's more like our approach and how it's replicated and how we think about things. I think mostly it's mostly about thinking about what we're going to do and what we want to do with the business, and how we want to take it. I think, and also an opportunity to write. I think that's the other thing is I do get to do some writing on topics that I'm curious about, because for me, I work out what I think by writing. I don't tend to in reading mainly. So I have to kind of write things out in order to kind of work out what my opinions are about them. Yeah. So that's kind of what they're for.
So is this something you would want to focus more next year, writing part?
Writing. Yeah, okay. So
because you've mentioned to me that you would like to eventually write a book. So
yeah, a book has been in my periphery for a long time. It's really funny because I don't know if anyone has seen have you seen the Netflix documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No.
Bear with me. How we go with this. Okay, so I've never really had an opinion about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I just thought he was kind of a meat-headed actor, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But his documentary is fantastic. It's really great. It's a really interesting insight in someone who I've never not met, but I've never come across anyone who is so focused on what they want and building a career, and then using the sort of the end of his career to kind of give back and offer advice and nurturing and support and mentorship. And, he's made some major cock-ups along the way. Like, he's done some terrible things, and he's fully willing to admit that. But it's a really great documentary. Anyway, so we have the book that he wrote. That's kind of the sort of the thing for.
Oh, yeah, I saw it in the bookshop the other day.
Yeah, it's called Be Useful. And it's really easy read. It's really funny. And it's also really funny to read it in his voice. Like, if you read it and you hear like, be useful, you can hear his voice doing it. But
did he do an audiobook?
Yeah, probably. I'm sure he did. Yeah, I'm sure he would have done. I mean, it'd be amazing. He'd be like, yeah. It's brilliant. But his book is really great. And, he brings in a lot of Stoic philosophy, which I'm a big fan of. And he brings in a lot of ideas that they're sort of, I think, universal principles. We see them in religions. We see them in business books. We see them in psychology, these sort of simple ideas. But they're simple, but they're hard to implement. They're hard to live these ways. Anyway, so he talks a lot about these things and, hard work and how, being of service to people, which I really like that concept anyway. But he was talking about how, that we, you see these things about consistency. I am answering your question about the book, just for the record. So he talks about this thing about consistency. And he was saying, if you write one page every day, at the end of a year, you have a 365-page book. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that's so obvious, but you think when you have these big ideas or things that you want to do, sometimes it's so useful to break them down into really small components, because then you think, oh, if I had to write a page a day, I could easily do that. That would take me 40 minutes, an hour, maybe. If I sectioned off an hour, I could do it easily. Right. And I don't, when you write a book, you never start from the beginning. You start from where you're at, and then you piece together the book as you go. But it takes some sort of momentary pause to be like, oh, if I just dedicated an hour of my day from now until this time next year, I would have a 365-page book. It might be total crap, but you could do it. You could do it. So I'm like, oh. So I think I like to try it. I'm not sure I'm in the headspace yet to be able to sit down and do it, though. I think we're still in a really interesting period of the business, and it's, we're not out of that kind of startup mentality. We still have a lot of things that we have to do and we want to do. So it's just kind of waiting in the wings a little bit. But I mean, maybe if I could write, every other day for the next year, I would have half of a book or. So yeah.
True. I mean, even once a week, right? You have like a chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. If you like, maybe, yeah. Yeah. But it is hard because it's sort of, again, and that to sit down and write feels like a luxury, like a really painful luxury, because writing is really painful. But it's really,
but you still
really
enjoy
rewarding. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's well, because it helps me think. It helps me figure out what I'm thinking. But there's nothing worse than the blank page syndrome. You sit down and go, oh God, what do I think? What do I want to write? I have nothing to say. I'm so boring, So yeah. Sacrifice myself on the altar of writing. No, I'm just joking. I don't do that.
But you used to take a writing class, no?
I did creative writing. Yeah, I've done creative writing. I did a class many, many years ago, and then I did one at the beginning of this year. But they were fiction. It was fiction writing, which was interesting for me because I don't really write fiction. I mean, I was talking about this with someone else on a podcast a couple weeks ago about, which hasn't come out yet. So, but we were talking about like I really struggle with imagination and play in this context. So I think for me, writing fiction was really challenging because it's hard for me to make stuff up. But what it did is it did make me a better writer. It made me like learn how to edit much better. It made me learn how to show, not tell in a ways and stuff like that. Yeah. But I mean, that was hard. I mean, we had a piece we had to write every week, and then yeah, it was a lot. It's too much, if I'm honest. I was on my own though, right? Because you hadn't started, so it was a little. It was a little intense.
Yeah. I mean, that's always surprising. I mean, still surprising for me to think about that you did all the work on your own, because it's such a broad subject to run business and help others run business. You kind of need to wear lots of hats, and for me it was unimaginary that it would be possible in just one single person.
I know. I'll never forget when you interviewed and you thought we were like a team of 5 or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, it's just me slowly losing my mind. But but when you said, I think when you first started, you were really shocked about how much moving around we did between different topics. You know, we have these sort of 5 pillars that we work within. And, you know, jumping from finance to branding to ops to big picture back to ops again it is hard. And I think I didn't realize I was doing that until you pointed it out to me. And then it made me think, oh, maybe that is why I'm so tired. Maybe this is why this is so stressful, because I'm constantly jumping between different things. And there is studies about focus, right? And about, you know, like being able to sit with longer with one subject and then being able to move to the next one is actually better for you. You're more effective. But I just felt like getting into that sort of, I think it was in doing mode, right? You're just doing what needs to be done for people.
Yeah.
And not having the time to come up for air and think, why am I doing it this way? Until there's someone who comes in completely objectively and is like, why are you doing this way? I'm like, I don't know. Help me. So, yeah.
So do you have a favorite from those, you mentioned those 5 pillars we like to work with and break down the business. Do you have a favorite from those?
I'm going to make myself sound like a huge nerd, but I actually really like the finances, because I think that the finance always tells the real story about what's going on. And numbers don't lie. I love the money bit. I also really love the big picture bit, because for me, it's so exciting to see what potential a company could have, or what, you know, they'll think, oh, I have this idea, but it's kind of stupid. And you're like, no, let's really look at this and see, you know, how we can make it work. I think operations I like the least. That's the least interesting for me. But I think it's because I spent so much time being in ops, like, and doing it. It's not, but I love it when everything works really well too. So I kind of can see the beauty in it. But yeah, finance and big picture are probably my favorites. Because I just like the money. I mean, I fell in love with accounting when I was 12, which is so embarrassing to say in a public sphere. I didn't realize I just said that.
Wow.
But I took an accounting class when I was when I was in middle school, and I loved it because I loved how things all made sense and everything matched up. And if they didn't match up, it didn't make sense. And that's obviously mainly bookkeeping or whatever. But I loved the way that when you started getting into numbers, you would see how they started to tell that story. And, you know, and part of like some of the audit process that we do, you know, we look at the last 3 years in depending on the size of the business, will look at the last 3 years of their accounts, and you'll be able to see how the money reflects where they are now. You'll see a huge, maybe they took too much money out of the business, or maybe they got a big payout, and then you can see that they've been writing that finances for the while, but they haven't actually been proactive about the sort of the income up to the present. So it's so interesting to go and look at those things, because I'm like, they can tell you whatever they think is the real issue, but then you look at the numbers and you're like, no, that's the issue.
Yeah, but it's hard for clients to accept it, right?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like even though like money, as you're saying, it's like given, it either matches up or doesn't. It's still hard for them to believe data.
Yeah, I think it's because it's not necessarily, it's not so black and white for them, right? We have the luxury of being objective about the whole thing. But for them, it's a reflection of their performance, right? Or of their ability to run a business. And and I think we need to be sensitive to that, because it's not a criticism. It's never meant to be critical. It's meant to be like, knowledge, right? Because when we have knowledge, we can make better decisions. But I think that especially in creative entrepreneurship, it is so emotionally driven. It's so personal. It's so, the identity of the founder is often wrapped up in the identity of the business. It's really, they're inextricably linked. It's really hard. So, the way we present it has to be done in a way that's empathetic to where they are, and also because I'm, for me on this side of the table, I know what that's like, and so it's much easier to be like, don't worry about it. Like, okay, it's done, it's in the past, but we need to know what's happening here so that we can make better decisions going forward. But forget it. Like, don't give yourself a hard time about it. Like, things happen. We make bad decisions, we make good decisions, we make decisions where we have 30% of the information we need, and we just do the best we can. So there's no point in giving yourself a hard time about it, or being defensive, because there's like, well, what's that going to do? So
I think that's what you mentioned quite a few times, right? It's important to make the decision and move forward, and then you can evaluate, see how it worked, and possibly adjust and make another one, right? But not kind of freeze. And
but that being said, Adam Grant, right? You've heard of Adam Grant? Yeah. So he has this book called Think Again, I think is what he says. But there's something about, when I've always said that, like, it's make a decision, like, be good at making a decision. And I do believe that to some extent. However, I think sometimes from my point of view, it's easier to make a decision. And I think I don't give enough space and empathy to people who are struggling to make a decision. And so this is something that I've been learning very recently, that sometimes it's just hard to make the decision. And to get someone over the line is, maybe that's not really our job. Maybe our job is to like be empathetic and be supportive enough to help them be able to feel comfortable making that decision, but not try and force it, because it's making a decision when you're forced to do it will always feel bad. So I guess for me, it's like being more patient about that. But I do think that decision making, the ability to be comfortable with some level of risk and being comfortable making a decision, is what differentiates great businesses from other businesses. Because if you aren't comfortable with something not potentially working out, you're going to struggle, because you'll always be wondering what the inevitable, and there's no way to predict them. And most of the time, the bad things won't happen. You make a decision to do something, and you have to live with the consequences of that, but maybe it'll lead to a better decision next time, or whatever. So, yeah.
So you mentioned this audit process. Can you maybe tell me a bit more, like, how did you come up with this whole idea of actually
doing an audit?
On creatives, because that's
so. So when I started my own thing, Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I realized I followed a really similar trajectory to sort of the big consulting firms, which I didn't realize, which is kind of funny because I kind of stumbled upon it without really realizing it. But I think that the reason I did it, it was because when I first started doing consulting, I thought of myself as like this sort of Mary Poppins person who would, parachute into a business on my little umbrella and go in and just sort stuff out for them. And that, because that would have been my experience up to that point. Like I would get hired for a role and then I would just come in and I would just sort stuff out for people. But what I had left out was this whole element of context and how I didn't understand what was really going on in the business that I'd be working with as a consultant. I just say yes to whatever they asked me to do because I could probably do it. And then I realized that maybe the lever that we were pulling was actually the wrong lever and maybe we should be looking at something else. So I started creating an audit process that was all the questions that I had always had about businesses from these different pillars that helped me get some perspective on what was actually going on behind the scenes. And it also allowed me to start building some ideas for a vision for this company. Like what is the potential that they have, right? So, because that means, as I said, that's the thing I'm really interested in. I think that is a skill set that I have, which is seeing what the potential of a company could be when they can't see it themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
So when I started the audit process, it was a way of asking them the hard questions, but also helping me to understand what actually needed to be done. Because if someone came to me and said, "Oh, can you just do, a financial model for us?" I'd be like, "Okay, I can go do it." But then actually, if I realized that the problem was their sales pipeline, then that's actually something that needs to be addressed. Yes, that would need to be done, but that's not really the sort of the main problem. We need to go further upstream. So it just helps it be much more, helps us do better work. Actually, I think be more thoughtful in our implementation.
Yeah, and I think it's very nice. Also, the possibilities you start seeing and actually help the client to see like where it can go and where they can take it, right?
Yeah. I think, but I have to be careful with that because I think I get like a Labrador golden retriever about the whole thing. I'm like, let's go do this thing. We can do it. But again, it goes back to that having that empathy for where people are at the time and not trying to force it. And that's why I think sometimes with some of our clients, I've been being much more short term in the way we think about things because whereas I might be able to see where they could go, they're maybe not there yet. So maybe we just go a little bit in the future where they feel more comfortable with planning for that. And that can be, and then that just tips their toe in the water to what their potential could be. But yeah, it's the most rewarding thing seeing people like doing great work for themselves and, feeling more like they have control over it. And by, us helping them a little bit, like, stuff that for us would probably be quite low hanging fruit, but for them, it makes such a huge difference. So, yeah.
And so, I think it's not that long time ago, we did this little exercise and actually applied your audit process on ourselves.
Yeah. When you were here.
Like a speed up version, of course. Yeah. But that was quite interesting for me to like very quickly determine where we might need to improve or where we need to focus in the upcoming months. So how was it for you to actually use it on yourself? Something that you came up with?
I didn't.
I don't think you've done it before, right?
No. Well, no. And also having you as well, because you could be objective about it.
Yeah.
I've never done it on myself because, it's like, everything's great. I'm doing it for myself. I think when we did it on us, it kind of reinforced the benefits of it because it really does force us to answer questions that we might not have the answer for. And I think that's the thing. It's okay not to have the answer for stuff, but at least if it starts getting you thinking about what it is, I mean, for us, our big thing was obviously around marketing. It's around how we brand awareness, how we're getting things out there, how we work with clients and the sort of the pipeline for that and all that stuff. And financials, like thinking about our earning potential. What can we do? And I think like it was really fun to kind of, poacher term gamekeeper, I think is the phrase, do you know that one?
No.
Where it's like basically, I don't know if they have an equivalent in Czech, but it's like poacher term gamekeeper means like, the person who's trying to kill something becomes like the person looking after it. So it's like roles flip. And Yeah. We're trying to see, actually it's good to test the model on ourselves to see if it does bring the insights, and it does, which I think is cool. And I think it maybe, I think the audit as well is like, we've done it, I've created it, but it's there to be edited, it's there to be improved and tweaked as we grow and learn. And I'm learning loads of stuff at the moment about cold sales, and and I'm reading this book called The Business of Expertise by David C. Baker, and it's really interesting about positioning and all that stuff. So it's like, how can we take that information for ourselves, but also how do we apply it to clients and incorporate that information into the audit and just get better at it.
So, because I feel like the steady pipeline is kind of shared. I mean, of course, everyone wants to have a steady pipeline, but it's also like one of the biggest struggles, I'd say, for our current clients.
I think it's a struggle for most people, unless they have like a strong sales process. I think lead generation is, because most of the time we live in a world where we rely on word of mouth, which is wonderful. It's, having someone recommend you is the best thing in the whole world. But it's very passive in its approach, because you are relying, the marketers always say, well, you're relying on your clients to recommend you, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it just means that you are kind of at their whim. So unless you you could kind of, Joanna Galval does that thing about, using your clients as an opportunity to do warm outreach and, to get better referrals and things like that. There's ways of using that in a more proactive way. But yeah, lead generation is like, it's really uncomfortable. No one wants to go out and be like, hey, especially when, I think we go back to the thing about how our emotions are so tied up with like the thing that we're doing. It's like, if I put this thing out and if someone doesn't like it, it's like, oh God, they don't like my thing. And it can be quite, it's just a vulnerable thing to do. And, but if we don't do it, I don't think you can really progress in your company very far. Yeah. What's been some of the challenges for you? I'm going to turn it on you. I want to ask you questions. What are some of the challenges for you so far in the last 9 months? Like getting your head around all this stuff.
Well, I think actually it was this schizophrenia of, and not necessarily about the zooming in, zooming out. I think that was always kind of for me very natural thing to do, like being interested into the details, but also actually wanting to understand the context and wanting to know the context. And whenever I wouldn't have it, I would feel really insecure. But more about the jumping from, one pillar to the other, talking about like financials, and then suddenly ops and what's the vision. It is to an extent necessary, because it's all so connected, it's so intertwined that you kind of need to always think about it all together. But I think that was really difficult for me at the beginning. Like I was recently thinking about, or talking to someone, like, how was it at the beginning? And I was like, I felt so lost. I was like, oh my God, now we're talking about this.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it was a great way how to actually learn to be able to think in all the different perspectives. Like you kind of, even when you're thinking about, I don't know, brand, you still need to keep the financials on mind, right? So it's necessary to kind of have it all in one brain. I think it was just something that I needed to get used to, because previously I worked purely in ops, so that was of course just one pillar. I was just complaining about all the others.
Now you understand how they talk to each other. They're like, oh, this is why this isn't working. No, I mean that is true. I think my experience has been to this point has been in all those pillars, and I think that it's I didn't realize up until recently probably that how of a unique and beneficial experience that was, because it really gave me the opportunity to really see things from different angles. And I think that also, but I also think learning them within the context of design has been interesting, because I think it's changed how I think about them. You know, I think my thinking around this process and even in terms of implementation is about iteration, right? And testing, because if you go into it with like a mindset of design thinking, then it's less, it's more exploratory, it's more opportunity, it's not rigid. And I think that is more beneficial for creative entrepreneurs, because they want to have that element of testing and creativity and problem solving that, if you just said you have to do it like this every single time, I think that would be difficult. So I like the fact that my experience has been from these angles, but just within the sort of the umbrella of creative business, because it just means like it's just a very, very pinpointed kind of experience, which is good, right? I mean, we want to have that kind of a niche, but it's
yeah, you definitely need to be creative among creatives, right? It's like just a different type of creativity.
Yeah. And I think that probably as well, like, we always go into it like, when we were talking to Nick Maynard, and he was saying like he sees his accounting firm as a creative business. Like we are a management consultancy, but I see us as a creative business. Like we are fully creative. And it's so funny to kind of, I think, to be trying to make space for that within our industry when we're kind of lumped in the kind of like the admin bit or the boring bit, and we're like, oh no, this is like one of the most creative bits of your business, because it's basically magicking something from scratch most of the time. So I find the whole thing, the fact that we're here talking even to this point, it's just been such a trip. Like just in 3.5 years of like, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would start my own business. Not once.
That's funny, because people, there was, can't remember, but someone was like, oh, it was so obvious you're going to start your own thing, because you just...
I remember. Yeah. I was like, no way, man. Not on your life. Not on your life.
So, but what happened?
Why did I do this?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure I told you this story. Well, I mean, during the pandemic, the company that I was working with, they wanted to take the business in a new direction, which didn't really align with what I wanted to do with my values and stuff. So they decided to do that. And I was like, well, I'm going to do something else. And I wasn't exactly sure.
But you could have gone and work for someone else, right?
Yeah, but for my 40th birthday, because the pandemic hit when I turned 40, which was like, global life-changing experience. And then, you hit 40, which is like quite a milestone of age. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I want out of my life. So it was with Tom Pinchard again. And we talked about basically around the fact that I had realized that when I worked within a design studio, I take it on as my own. And so I care about, I'm not saying this because I'm like, oh, this is so great. I actually think it was a negative, because I took it on, took it so personally, took it so close to home that it ended up, I think, clouding my judgment about how I worked with it. And also it meant that ultimately at the end of the day, it wasn't really mine. I mean, even in the last company, I was a shareholder, but I was really, I was only, one of four. So it didn't really, I didn't really have any sort of major say in the thing, and, it just didn't work. And so, I realized that we're working with Tom, we realized that if I wanted to do the work that I wanted to do, I would have to do it on my own kind of thing. Because then it's like it's on my own terms, and I can care enough about it and take it close to me, but without having to make it for someone else. But I really hadn't thought about getting into consulting, because I never really thought anyone wanted to know what I had to say. But there was a couple people who were like, oh, if you do this, you should think about, give me a call. And I was like, But then I sort of did what is basically a value proposition, talked to a bunch of people that I knew in the industry, and just said, if I did this thing, what would it be interesting? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, but I think what's curious about it is that the clients, I think, that we initially worked with in the beginning kind of saw me in that old version, which is when I was within a studio. They saw my skill set as basically a fixer or someone who could come and do stuff. But I think in recent years, our clients have become much more aware of that we do like the strategy, and we can be much more useful in that way. And then, and then we can help them build it if they want to. But it's that strategy bit
it's not
is
just
the most important.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens 3.5 years in.
So where do you see yourself in another 3.5 years?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh,
because you walked a long way.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3.5 years. Okay, so what year is that? That's 2027. No, 2026. Summer 2026.
True.
I think I would like to have a couple more people in the business. I think I'd like to help you move your role into more consulting, as opposed to, assuming you want to stick around, and into more consultative work, because I think you'll be really great at that. You're already picking up so much, so I think it's just a matter of time until I'm like, yeah, you have your own clients, off you go, great. But I think I'd like to. I think in 3.5 years, I'd like to have written a book. I think I could probably manage that.
And
oh God, no. 3 books. Oh God, people would be bored of me by that point. No, I think maybe I'll write a book by that point, and then I think maybe doing more speaking gigs, maybe doing some things like that. And I just want to keep building the business, because I think we have something really special, and I think the fact that we are both creatives, working with creative people, but on this side of things, is quite unique. I don't think it comes around that often, where people are like, oh no, we actually get like the creative mindset. What about you? What do you want to do in 3.5 years?
Oh God, don't ask me this.
You're like, no.
Horrible.
No, I don't want to put you on the spot. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry.
So hard for me to think about, like.
No, I know it is. I know.
Anything that goes, further than 1 year tops.
But I think that's fair enough. I think also, as we get older, it's easier to plan further in advance. But I think when you're sort of in your 20s and 30s, I think it's much harder to kind of, because life is just so varied. You're doing lots of different things. So
you don't know what happens, right?
No.
No. So on that note, if you could talk to your 28 self.
Oh God, I might cry.
Would you have any advice?
If I could talk to my 28-year-old self, oh God. I think I would have told myself to just keep following my curiosity on things, not worry too much about my career trajectory. Which is funny because that is kind of what I did, but I think the whole time I was anxious about it, that I wasn't going anywhere. And I remember when I did this marketing internship for a restaurant, when I was being interviewed for it, my boss was like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I was like, I think I'm like 30 at the time. I'm like, I don't know. Like, it was such a weird question, but I mean, hell, I don't know. But yeah, I think I would tell myself to just keep following my curiosity and not worry so much that like things aren't going to work out, because I do think things tend to work out. Not everything, but things do tend to work out, and sometimes out of the greatest disappointments, great things can come from that, which I've had quite a few big disappointments in my adult life, and I think that those have been some of the best in the end, some of the best things that have ever happened. So yeah, little piece of sage wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, because I think I'm still in the phase where I see it as like the end of the world, right? When something bad happens. Because I don't have the perspective maybe that actually, I mean, now I'm starting to have, but yeah, it's a process to get there.
I mean, I think I still panic about stuff, sure, but I'm starting to realize that it's either like, well, it goes back to the ability to make a decision, right? It's like I could sit and worry about something, or I could take action and find out about it, and then it becomes less scary. So it's even if it's the case, the action is just writing down what I'm afraid of or what I'm worried about, like, worst case scenario that's going to happen. And then you look at it on paper and you're like, that's probably not going to happen. But like getting it out there, having an ability to kind of engage with it is useful. So yeah. Yeah.
Well,
any other questions, Kat?
Thank you. I don't know. I feel like that was a nice one to end with, no?
Yeah, it was. And yeah, as I said, like, I mean, thank you so much for this year. Like, honestly, could have done it without you. It's been so brilliant. And
likewise. Thank you.
And I think like it's so incredible watching your development, and seeing how much you're learning, and yeah, it just feels really exciting to watch, because it is a baptism of fire doing these kind of startup things, but I think it can be such a great learning experience and all that
definitely
stuff.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in 2024. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you, Linds. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks again to Kat for her brilliant questions and insights. She's been a great colleague these past months, and I'm excited to see where we take Cloudfields in 2024. Once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, all those sorts of things. We'll be taking a brief hiatus over the holidays, but we're back with new episodes on Tuesday, the 2nd of January. For those of you who celebrate Christmas, we wish you a happy holiday season. And for everyone, we wish you a lot of rest, chill time with those you love, and we'll see you back here in 2024. Until then, be well. Understories was produced by Cloudfields and Kieran Fowler. The music is by Aves, and the branding is by the wonderful Joe Jones. See you in 2024.